Hey guys, I'm Curtis,
And I'm Havilah.
and we are Wander with the Workmans. And we were sitting here having a conversation we thought would bring it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do that, these little conversation things, we want to do more of them, and we've been trying to come up with a name. We've talked about calling it Table Talk, because we're sitting here at our dinette. I wanted to go with instead of between two ferns in front of one big map, but that doesn't seem to work out as well. Weekends with the Workmans. There's been a bunch of ideas that we just cannot settle on. So to start this whole thing off, if you've got a suggestion of what we should call this when we sit here and we talk to you about the things going on in our world and the thoughts we're having, if you'd leave those in the comment section below and maybe we can hit upon a better idea than either of us have been able to come up with, we'd really appreciate it. With that in mind, we wanted to talk about something that we didn't quite understand in the planning stages of going onto the road and actually getting on the road for the first little bit here. And this is something that's actually kind of, you recognize this a lot sooner than I did. So why don't you tell them what we didn't understand?
Right. So I had the idea that if we didn't have rent any longer, we didn't have utilities, we didn't have all these different, costs associated with our lives anymore. Well, gosh, life was going to be so much cheaper. We were going to boondock 100% of the time. Life was going to be so cheap, it's practically free. And what we realized after a while is that RV living can cost just as much, if not more, than sticks and bricks living if you don't pay attention to your expenses. And that's where we got in trouble because we've realized that there's a couple different things where we have ended up spending a lot more money than we had thought that we were going to. Where one is gas. There's 2 months in a row where we spent over $500 a month on our gas and for our diesel for our truck. And, in our previous Sticks and Bricks house, we were spending like $508 or something like that for our rent, for our home. So we thought, oh, we don't have rent anymore. Yeah, but you can spend a lot in gas very easily. And so we realized that was a major issue.
Right. And the basic premise to RV living is not that it's inherently cheap or cheaper. It is what you make it.
Yeah.
If you end up wanting to live that brand new Class A with a towed vehicle style, you are going to have payments that we don't have. Or if you want to just convert the back seat of your Nissan Pathfinder into a bed, you're going to have fewer expenses than we have. So it is what you make it. And that's kind of the conclusion we came to, is it's not just inherently cheaper. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So we're doing something this month after looking at last month. We're doing something this month that's a little bit different.
Yeah, so we thought that we would do a living cheaply challenge for 30 days and see how low we can keep our expenses for the next 30 days. So, excuse me. In that, we came up with the ideas of eating out a lot less. That we have two major areas that we spend more money on than we had planned. One is diesel, and the other is food, meaning both grocery stores and eating out. And so the real problem with eating out is that you're in all these new towns, and there's all these great new restaurants that look so good, and you're tired. You've been moving all day. You just let's just go eat out for. Yeah, there was 1 month where we spent like $470 or something just on eating out. That was on top of over $1,000 in groceries.
Now, not to say that the food wasn't good. It was well worth it. It's just if you don't have it, you can't get it. And
right.
so
You shouldn't be spending that kind of money.
Right. So we kind of identified some strategies that even last month that we thought would work. And then they're kind of the knee-jerk reaction, obvious answers: eat out less, go to town less, cook more, those kinds of things. And they're all great ideas, but they're better looking on paper than they are in reality.
Yeah. Well, we found that we were like, okay, we're going to put together a gas budget, and we're going to calculate these are the stops we're going to make in the next month. This is how much gas it takes to go to those stops, and then we're going to add in extra so that we can go back and forth between our campsite and the nearest town, a couple of times. But other than that, we're not going to go to town. And we decided that we weren't going to go to town because then it was a lot less of like, oh man, while we're here, we should really get those sorts of things.
Impulse buying gets us in trouble. I think it happens to everybody. Stores market to it. That's why you see the magazines and the gum and the candy bars next to the registers and stuff, because you're standing there and you might as well grab it while you're standing there. So we fall victim to impulse buying quite frequently. Well, more so me. I'll be honest, I'm the spender. In between the two of us, I'm the one that spends, but I also do a lot more of the running to town to get groceries, so I'm more susceptible to, while I'm here.
Right, yep.
And that kind of thing. So we do get in trouble with impulse buying. But we found that there are other external issues that kind of sabotage this thing. And again, this is a lot of me. Because I don't like to be inside all the time. I suffer from cabin fever. I contract it quicker. I suffer for it more egregiously. It lingers longer.
Yes.
I want to be out. I want to be doing something, even if it's just sitting in my lawn chair working on a video or something else. I don't want to be inside as much. And this has nothing to do with the size of our trailer. I was this way when we were in a sticks and bricks life as well. I just didn't want to be in the house. And so I end up finding reasons to go to town, and especially this last stop, because the weather has turned on us. And that has forced us inside more. We are in a New Mexico state park that offers hiking, it offers fishing, bird watching, all of these things that would be great if it wasn't 20 degrees outside with a 20-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah.
And so it's real to solve this problem. For me, it's real easy to scurry out to the truck, ride in the truck where it's nice and warm, scurry across the Walmart parking lot, and then wander around Walmart for a little bit to get myself out, stretch my legs, that kind of thing.
But there was always a veneer of, but we really need this. We're out of heavy whipping cream, and that's just tragic. We must go to the store right now because we are out. So I will go to the store and buy the heavy whipping cream, and you, dear wife, can just stay behind. And I'm not saying that all of the trips were like that, but we may have had more than a couple where they were manufactured trips.
And so part of our cheaply living challenge is actually to further evaluate our initial strategies of eat less, eat out less, go to town less, and take a deeper dive into what are the external factors. And we've come up with some different strategies.
Right.
Starting with move less. That was one of our ways to save fuel, was move less. And we kind of firmly committed to, we are going to be in this spot for 2 weeks, and then we're going to move to this next spot for 2 weeks, so there's only 2 moves in a month. But if that weather turns, so our first strategy is being willing to bail out more often and move more frequently, because a 30-40 mile trip down the road might change the weather enough that we're not making 10 trips to town at 5 miles per leg.
Yeah, so even if we were to move, say, 100 miles to the next state park, you can drop quite a bit in elevation, get closer to sea level, and it can warm up quite a bit in there. Thus, you can be outside a lot more without having to bundle up in your tundra gear, which we don't have because we're only going to stay in 70-degree weather and nothing else. Yeah, that was a good idea.
Yeah, we probably should have sent Mother Nature a memo on our plans. So being willing to move more frequently to chase better temperatures is just, in terms of sitting outside and working rather than being cooped up inside, is an advantage. But we're also picking sites that offer activities or amenities that are inherent to the admission fee. So we're staying in a lot of state parks that offer trails, offer access to water for fishing, bird watching, great sunsets, access to stargazing and that kind of thing, so that we have that entertainment factor built into our campsite choice.
Right. That is free. That it takes you putting on your shoes and walking outside, and that's it in terms of costs. And so if we realize that this firm we will not move until 2 weeks is up, is actually costing us more than if we were willing to move because the weather just isn't good enough. And
let's be honest, it's because I have no impulse control. The other thing we're doing is redesigning how we shop. We have fallen into or found things that we like, our staples. I think everybody does this. You have these particular food items specifically that you have to have. You have to have bread. You have to have milk. You have to, whatever it is for you. So we're identifying that. Usually what we would do is make a shopping list. Oh, we're out of this and we're out of that, and let's grab some of this while we're at it. But instead we're going to start with a staple list. So before we leave the trailer, we can identify what we actually need from that list of needs. So if we do have bread, we don't have to get bread. And we know when we get to the store, we don't need it.
Right. So the idea is that we just sort of assumed that because these are the staples, we buy it every single time. We know what we need. We'll remember, oh yeah, we're totally out of eggs. We need to add that to the list. Sometimes it just didn't occur to us that, oh yeah, we are out of eggs. We need to add that to the list until we got back home. And the next morning I went to make breakfast and we have no eggs. And then it's like, oh, shucky darn, I guess I have to go back to town again. Get out of this trailer. And so if we have a list that we can go through before we leave and every single item, look at it, look in the cupboard, look in the fridge and verify, do we need this item? Yes, no, put it on the list or don't. By having that list made out ahead of time and checking through it, hopefully there will be a lot less of those, crud, I totally forgot that we needed to buy XYZ.
Which then triggers a trip to town the next day. And that's kind of the problem is then you're burning diesel or gas and that kind of thing. The other thing that we had done previous to this is, and I don't think we ever talked about it, but we just fell into this pattern of separating food from other consumables. And so if we were going to town, we didn't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to town to grocery shop and buy diesel. We would go to town to buy groceries, and then we would go to town to buy diesel. And then we would go to town to fill propane, and then we would go to town to do laundry. Now, by having a divide, whether it's conscious or subconscious, it led us down this road of not being able to effectively chain trips together. And part of that was the hesitancy to do partial fill-ups, especially when talking about, well, all of them really, because we only wanted to do laundry when we had gone through every pair of socks, every pair of jeans, every t-shirt. We only wanted to buy diesel when we were down to a quarter of a tank in each of our tanks. We only wanted to buy propane when they were dead out. Now, there's a caveat to the propane thing in that we've discovered that some places only charge by full fill. And that's kind of an issue because if you take in a partially full propane tank, they're still going to charge you as if it were empty and they filled the whole darn thing. So propane has a little bit of a caveat to it, but there's nothing wrong with buying a half a tank of diesel rather than waiting until it's down to a quarter. And there's nothing wrong with doing a load or two of laundry versus doing 15 loads of laundry. So by recognizing that divide, we're able to combine the food purchasing trips with our other consumable replacement trips.
Yeah, so the plan, and this is a great theory, and we're going to tell you how it goes, is that when we decide to do a trip into town, we're going to go through all the food, right, that list that we're going to put together, and then also go through the propane, diesel, and laundry, and decide, can we get any of those also at the same time? And so before we walk out the door, we have all of that as a decision, because a lot of times, like, we tended to get somewhere and go, oh yeah, you know what, we should have bought, we need to buy diesel, and or we should have brought some of our propane tanks with us, and it's like this, like, not necessarily well planned out life we were living.
Now, there's a couple of rules here. of things that we're not going to include, and that is repair costs. Repair costs pretty much can't go into a planning thing. There are things, they're maintenance costs, and that can be planned. But we're talking about repair costs. Recently, we broke the city water connection on our trailer, which meant we couldn't hook up to a regular spigot. And never having replaced that part before, I didn't know what we were getting into, and it ended up being kind of an adventure, because not only did I not know what I was getting into, the replacement part is different in size, and so there were some other modifications. It wasn't just take the old one out and put the new one in. I had to modify the trailer, the size of the port that it went into, and that kind of thing. I think I ended up making like 8 trips to the hardware store. Luckily,
that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. Luckily, at that point, we were right next door. Our campground was right next door. But if you don't have that option, because breakdowns, again, don't happen so conveniently all the time, you may have to drive to town several times. And we're not going to restrict ourselves and say, well, we won't repair that until we're at a campground near a town. We're going to repair it. And so that is an unforeseeable, unplannable kind of situation. So in our living cheaply challenge, say that 3 times fast,
Right.
we're not going to include repairs as well. And we don't have at this point any regularly scheduled maintenance for this month.
Right.
We do include that in our budget, but we are good on oil changes. We don't need any new propane tanks or anything like that. So for this month and this month only, we're only going to be talking about changing the variables, not the constants. Constants. Yeah. English is good with him.
Yeah, so we're going to be focused quite a bit on reducing our grocery line budget, reducing our eating out budget, reducing our propane use budget, our diesel budget, and laundry. I think that's it.
Now, there's one thing we haven't talked about yet that I want to mention, and that is when we started researching going on the road, one of the things that a lot of the resources we experienced and found said be wary of vacation mode.
Right.
And that is this idea of like, we're in California, so we've got to go spend money at a vineyard, and we've got to go to Disneyland, and we've got to go to California Adventures, and we got to go. That will run your bills up really quickly. In the previous month, we've also overcompensated for that. We basically have restricted our entertainment budget, and that's why eating out less instead of saying not eating out at all is part of eating out is entertainment. But we overcompensated to the point where we weren't doing any of the adventuring stuff.
Right.
And so it may seem simple, but I'm going to make the distinction between vacation mode and adventure mode. Because what we ended up doing is we ended up acquiring all of the sticks and bricks aspects of life, and all of the
pains and the patooties.
Yes, the problems with RV life without any of the benefits.
Yeah.
And so what's the point of doing this if you're not going out to adventure? But again, there is that distinction of tripping over where I'm in vacation mode and have to go experience everything all at once. And so we're trying to manage that aspect as well. Again, that goes back into taking advantage of the amenities in the parks that we stay at, and that kind of thing, is to still continue to get that adventure feel without being tourists.
Right. And like pretty much all of life, it's just a moderation thing. You know, you can go from, I am just going to sit here in the trailer and work all day, every day. And at night, I might watch a movie or something to relax. And the next day, I'm going to get up and do it all over again 7 days a week. That's something that I might or might not be prone to do. I'm kind of a workaholic. So it's easy for me to stay here and just work. And it's hard for Curtis to just stay here and work, because there's only so much that he can do. His career is a very different career than mine. And so my career could expand to take up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and you could still feel like you haven't gotten everything done that you want to get done. And it's very different for him. And so we just need to be able to go out, have some fun, but not live in this extravagant, party it up every night sort of thing. There is a middle ground, turns out.
Right. Once again, it is what you make it.
Yeah.
So that is our challenge for the next month, is to live cheaply, or cheaper than we have been previously. We're going to give you regular updates, and at the end of this series, at the end of the month, we're going to show you actual numbers of what we spent in the month prior to this, as well as what we spent this month, and hopefully be really, really frank about whether or not our new strategies were successful or were not.
And part of that, part of that is there's a misconception out there, kind of, that if you boondock, that reduces your costs the most. And we are actually not going to be boondocking. We are going to be using the New Mexico Parks State Pass system in order to keep our expenses low. And we do have a video out on that topic, and we'll link to it in the description below. But we are not boondocking in order to reduce our expenses. And I believe that actually, in a lot of ways, allows you to reduce your expenses more than if you were to boondock. And I know that's heresy.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, to say the least. At least from what we imagined when we first started out on the road. And so as part of the cheaply living challenge, we'll come up with a name, is to discuss how using the State Parks Pass here in New Mexico has allowed us to reach these goals of reducing our expenses.
Yeah, more so than boondocking would allow us to reduce our expenses. So I think that'll be in a future video.
Yeah, it'll be included in this series. In the meantime, you guys, if you have any suggestions on how to reduce expenses while living on the road, there's always the comment section down below. Be sure to leave those for us. If you have any questions about what we're doing, if there's something you want more explanation about, go ahead and leave those questions in the comments below. In the meantime, if you like what we're doing and you want to keep up with this, be sure to click the subscribe button. Again, it is right below us as well. And once you do that, it'll turn on the bell notification. You can click that as well, and YouTube will send you a message anytime we put out a new video. If you want to keep up with us on a more regular basis, you can follow us on Instagram. We are Wander with the Workmans on Instagram as well. And in the meantime, you guys, we'll see you down the road.
Bye.